The Selma to Montgomery March is one of the most significant periods in all of American history. The marchers arrived in Montgomery on March 24, 1965, having traveled along Highway 80. They arrived at the city of St. Jude, happy but tired. The next morning, March 25th, the marchers left the city of St. Jude, led by Dr. Martin Luther King. Along Oak Street, they traveled north. When they reached Hope Street, they turned north and passed the Mount Zion AME Zion Church. From there to Montgomery Street. And en route of traveling along Montgomery Street, when they looked to their right, they could see that federal courthouse where Judge Johnson and his colleagues had given them permission to march from Selma to Montgomery. By the time they had reached the Capitol, I imagine they were tired, but they were jubilant. That's where Dr. King gave one of his most historic speeches of all time. And many people remember that "How long, not long" speech that he gave that afternoon. Today we want to go back to 1965 and see if we can recapture the moment. And we have many of the persons who were part of that Selma to Montgomery March to offer their reflections. Some were male, some were female, some were members of different religious denominations, but one thing they all held in common: they believed that African Americans, Black people, deserved the right to vote. They wanted to make certain that the 14th Amendment was enforced and the First and 15th Amendment were enforced. And that's what we will present to you today.
Because no lie can live forever.
Yes, sir.
How long? Not long.
How long?
Because you shall reap what you sow.
Yes, sir.
How long? Not long.
How long?
Truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne.
Yes, sir.
Yet that scaffold sways the future.
Yes.
Behind the dim unknown standeth God within the shadow, keeping watch above his own. How long? Not long. Because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice.
Yes, sir.
How long? Not long.
Not long.
Because mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Yes, sir.
In 1965, when you even attempted to register to vote, when certain people in the community learned that you had tried to register to vote, some things happened to you that were not so good. In Wilcox County, of the more than 5,000 African American men over the age of 21, only 0% of those persons were registered to vote. Let's go to Lowndes County. More than 5,000 African American men there over the age of 21. How many were registered to vote? 0. So you can see how frustrated, how angry, how upset, how concerned some of these African Americans may have been. The date was February the 18th. In Marion, Perry County, again in the Black vote, some Black people decided to hold a demonstration. One Black person who stood up to try to protect his relative from an assault by one of these law enforcement officials was killed. His name was Jimmy Lee Jackson, a Baptist church deacon. He was shot and died a couple days later at the hospital in Selma. James Bevel and a couple of others decided at that point a march from Selma to Montgomery might be an excellent way to illustrate the frustration, the concern of Black people, not just in Marion, Perry County, but in the Black Belt and really in the state of Alabama. So the Dallas County Voting League invited Dr. King and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference to come to Selma and lead that march. It just so happened that those marchers left the Brown Chapel AME Church to walk those couple of blocks to the Edmund Pettus Bridge to begin their trip to Montgomery. Governor Wallace had issued an order prohibiting the march the day before. So as those marchers approached the crest of that bridge, they looked over and they saw a sea of blue, state troopers, sheriff deputies, all of these people waiting to block their path en route to Montgomery. But they were attacked within 2 minutes of that. More than 50 people had to be hospitalized that day because of that attack. What law enforcement officials had not counted on was television coverage.
When George Wallace sent his chief, he sent John down to Selma to stop the march, what really helped the black people in the world to see with the TV cameras, because he did not anticipate the TV camera, and that what made it so successful. Without the communication, we wouldn't have to just, it'd be way more horrible thing that black people decided to being on the Edmund Pettus Bridge.
Knowing what happened in Selma the first time for Bloody Sunday, knowing I had to wait another time to get here, knowing that the people still was registering people to vote and losing their lives, you know. I was determined I was gonna be a registered voter.
I had already talked to a girlfriend of mine who lived in the street right behind St. Jude. And she had told me that you can make it over if we could march together. I'm going in, and I remember getting here and thinking to myself, I'm not going to find it. I had never seen that many people before in my life.
I drove out to Oak Street and Travis Street to watch the march pass by. At that time, what I wanted to do was to take the marches back to Selma, but my baby was 2 months old, and so I can get out to drive.
We ran from one side of the building at St. Jude, looking out the window to the other side, and I could just hear the teachers saying, they're coming, because they could see them out the window coming down Fairview.
So when the time the march came through, the Selma to Montgomery March, and the march organizers were looking for a place where the marchers would be safe. So it was a natural place that the march organizers turned to St. Jude for shelter and help for that.
No, I did not march from Selma to here, but I met them here on the premises. I met Harry Belafonte and Samuel Davis right out here on the ground of St. Jude.
Well, the march happened in '65, and I was born in '52. So I don't really remember anything like that. I just saw a lot of people doing things and moving around. And one particular day, I was taking my mother out to Woodcrest to my cousins, and she literally broke down and cried. And it scared me and it hurt me. And my mother said, you have to pull over, because they was doing a reenactment of that march that very day. So for you to see your mother, oh gosh, to see your mother cry about something so serious and people lost their lives, you can never imagine.
The Selma to Montgomery March was after the bus boycott being launched from this church. The people of the church who were present would have been very active in whatever happened going forward from that bus boycott on.
Well, we was hoping to see betterments of the black race as a whole. That's what the way we were being treated, we saw that we needed plenty of improvement in our situation.
We need to make certain that that area from the city of St. Jude on Fairview, along Oak Street, along what is now Fred Gray Avenue, along Hope Street, along that entire route, that we do something to magnify the significance of what happened there on March 25, 1965. Because those were brave people who participated in that Selma to Montgomery March. And those are brave people, we must admit, today, who will recount their stories about what happened along that route. We must applaud those people. We must salute those people, because what they did made a difference.